Alright, so I know many of you guys are pretty familiar with social anxiety, and I want to talk about how did I overcome social anxiety and how I used it in order to be confident. So, social anxiety, also known as social anxiety disorder, ASD, is a very common condition that a lot of individuals have in between the ages of when they're young children and teenagers. So I'm going to cover 5 main points. What is social anxiety? How did I overcome it? My story on social anxiety, how I used it to be confident, and how my social anxiety is going now. So we're going to start off at what is social anxiety, and I'm going to read this quote real quick. So, social anxiety is a disorder, also known as a social phobia. It is a condition in which people experience significant and sometimes paralyzing symptoms of anxiety in social situations, based on core deep fears related to evaluation and judgment by others. Anxiety Institute. So that means somebody with social anxiety in general, or social anxiety disorder, would walk into a group setting and would always feel like that they're being judged, because when people look at them, they get very nervous and they get very anxious because they instantly think that they're being evaluated by the people around them, and they become extremely conscious of deceiving thoughts that is not true, and it messes with people's brains, and it causes a lot of anxiety, and it's very difficult to cope with. So some of the symptoms of how anxiety makes people feel: a lot of people become very sweaty, people experience a lot of shyness, their heart starts racing, you would separate yourself from a lot of people. And I would like to mention another quote from Kids Health 2021. How does it limit an individual's social interactions? It limits an individual's social interactions because people with mild or major cases of social anxiety disorder experience many of these symptoms at once, that causes an individual to have a mental tantrum or panic attacks. So imagine somebody having all of those symptoms combined. It becomes so difficult to control because all of those symptoms are happening at once, and that causes somebody to have a tantrum or a panic attack. And eventually, when you have a panic attack, you would be using so much energy because there's so many defense mechanisms in the body, and that's happening all at once, and the body just starts burning out, and then eventually you become very distressed, and then you just become so tired because it was so many symptoms that were affecting your mental and physical health. So here's a little story that I would like to share. It's not really a full story, but I'm gonna share some parts of it. So throughout 6th grade and 8th grade, man, I had so much trouble talking to people. I had really difficulty making friends. I would be playing video games on my phone all the time. I would get so nervous talking to new people. I was only comfortable talking to the teachers. I did make a pretty solid amount of friends, but it's like I always wanted to be friends with more people, but I just didn't have the confidence to do so, and it was a really horrible feeling. And a lot of times I would run home because I didn't know how to properly put myself out there and just like have a good time like after school. I never really hanged out with anybody in middle school. So there's actually some advice that I got from my friends, and I'm going to tell you how this didn't help. So this allows us to move on to point 2. How my story on social anxiety. So one time, this is just a little scenario. One time I was in a party, and I was talking to my friends, and one of my friends are like, "Yo, why don't you just be yourself? Just, go up to that girl and try to get her number. And I listened to him. He said, be myself. I was like, okay. I have social anxiety right now, but I'm gonna do it. I went up to the girl and I looked at her and she looked at me and I was like, hey, you like what you see? And she was like, no, I have a boyfriend. And then I walked away after that. I felt really awkward and I got rejected, but I let the deceiving thoughts hit to me, and that's not what you're supposed to do if you want to decrease the amount of anxiety. So here's some ways of something from Wave Clinic of how getting advice from certain people may not be helpful. If only we could relax on command, then anxiety would be a cakewalk. Telling someone to calm down is not the way to help them cope. At best, it will be brushed off, and at worst, it insinuates that their symptoms are a choice. So that means instead of getting so depressed and anxious that I just got rejected, just say, instead you should be think positive. Just say, well, at least that I was able to do that. I did better than before. At least I was able to go up to this person and say something. But now I actually gotta watch what I say. So I think positive about it, and I was just like, it's only one girl. It's not the end of the world, okay? So here's another quote of how to overcome anxiety from statistics. How to overcome anxiety. Identify certain social situations that you're afraid of and work your way up to more difficult scenarios while practicing relaxation techniques so you could tolerate anxiety. So practice relaxing, go from smaller to bigger social settings, work your way up, build confidence, slowly become comfortable. Let's say maybe talking to your best friend, talking to an adult, talking to a therapist, and then slowly start working your way up to bigger friend groups or a greater amount of people, and eventually you will feel more comfortable and realize that it's not so bad. How did I overcome anxiety? I overcame anxiety by being a positive person overall. I would always compliment people, I would always be helping people, and I would always be greeting people, even if I didn't know them. For example, I would go up to somebody and I would say, hey, I really like your shoes. I know this is out of the blue, but I really like your shoes and I think they're really cool. Where did you get them? I'll say something like that and start a conversation like that. Or I would say, I see a stranger, I would say, hey, good morning. It's 7 a.m. Hey, good morning. If they don't say anything back, that's fine. Because you're doing this for yourself. You're trying to build confidence for yourself. So don't let the deceiving thoughts get to you. Just because they didn't say good morning back doesn't mean it's all over. It's for yourself. So now we're moving on to point 5. How I use social anxiety to be confident. So here's another quote from NCBI. Cognitive therapy is about forming a clear idea of your own thoughts, attitudes, and expectations. The goal is to recognize and changing false and distressing beliefs. So as I was saying, you turn those false beliefs. So for example, you think you're being made fun of by 3 girls that are sitting across from you. Instead, think positive and say, oh, they're probably looking at me because they think I'm cute. They probably want me to approach them. Or just say, oh, they probably think I'm eating in a cute way. Just say something like that. You see what I did? Instead of me thinking that they're judging me, I just changed it into a positive way. And I became more confident and more positive by changing the outlook of my thoughts. How my anxiety is going now, I actually don't have any social anxiety. It actually improved. And now I don't really have any difficulty talking to people. And that's a great thing. So, thank you. And we covered 5 things in this video. What is social anxiety? My story on social anxiety, how I overcome it, how I use social anxiety to be confident, and how my social anxiety is going now. So use my tips and be confident. Thank you.